Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another amazing episode on the Unleashing Potentials podcast. My name is Bernadette Desir, and I'm your host. And joining me today is special guest Paula M. Kramer. How are you?
I'm good. I'm happy to be here.
Happy to have you. Paula, can you tell us where you're tuning in from?
I am tuning in from rural central Wisconsin, from a village of less than 150 people.
That's not much.
Amazing what technology can do these days.
Wow, that's so cool. I'm happy you can join me from where you are.
I,
We were talking about the weather. What is the weather like where you are?
weather here, it's
Yeah.
warmer than normal. We've had very little snow here. I'm in central Wisconsin, northern part of the country, where we should
Mhm.
be snowed in, and we have barely any snow on the ground. For the last few winters,
Oh, wow.
snowstorms have gone through the center of the country
Yeah, yeah.
and missed us a lot. We've had a few snowstorms, but nothing like what the center of the country is getting. And certainly not like what California's got right now. Those
Yeah.
poor people. At least it's snow that can melt instead
Yeah.
of mud that has to be trucked away. At least the
Yeah.
snow will melt.
Yeah.
But still,
Yeah. 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 Well, I'll stay warm because it's freezing here. And it's funny because around the other side of the world, Australia, which I've talked to many people there recently, they might still be having a heat wave. And then here we are freezing on this side of the world. It's fascinating. Yeah, yeah,
it's fascinating. Yes. And Texas needs all the snow that California has.
yeah.
Imagine if that snow went to Texas, that would be the end of the fires.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you for sharing, Paula. Can you tell us who you are and what you do?
I I could say survivor. My favorite way of describing myself now is that I've gone from silenced voice to international voice.
Mm,
My mother stereotyped me as a threat the day I was born
mm,
because I was her second daughter instead of her first son. She had been raised to believe that she could prove herself a worthy woman only as the mother of a son. And so I
mm,
was a threat to her identity. And she tried to kill me twice.
mm,
And those attempts stopped when she got pregnant again. And luckily, that child was a boy, her first son.
yeah,
But I was still a threat because I was still her second child and second daughter. And I could grow up and say what she did to me. So she taught everyone in my family to ignore what I said and discount what I did.
mm-hmm,
And that was my childhood. My father loved me, and I knew he loved me. He told me I was his favorite child, which is something parents shouldn't do. But in my case, it kept me
mm,
sane growing up with a mother who tried to kill me.
mm,
But my mother was a narcissist who had been raised by a mother who was paranoid schizophrenic. So my mother
mm,
was didn't get much nurturing. My grandfather probably nurtured her, but my paranoid schizophrenic grandmother threatened him with a butcher knife one day, and he took it seriously enough to leave the family.
oh,
I
wow.
don't know. And my mother, I later on found out, was the second daughter who was supposed to be a son. Their
Mm,
first child was a boy who died in infancy, then my aunt, Terry, and then my mother. I don't know if my grandmother tried to kill my mother, but she threatened her husband, my grandfather. So violence has been in my family for at least two generations.
mhm, mhm,
And so that was my childhood. I was afraid of my father. I have to go back to my father. My mother was a narcissist because of her childhood. So she didn't know how to nurture anyone, and she was brutal to everyone emotionally. My father became a quiet alcoholic to bury his feelings. He
mhm,
really loved my mother and
mhm,
really wanted to please her, but he couldn't. So he buried his feelings with alcohol.
mhm,
And you can't keep feelings buried. So occasionally he would break out into rages that would last for hours or days. In one of those rages, he accidentally, unintentionally broke my older sister's arm. So I was terrified of my mother. I was afraid of my father. Now, I did not grow up thinking mom tried to kill me.
Mm,
because I couldn't do that. I would go insane
mhm,
thinking every
mhm,
day. I had to break up the memory into separate physical, mental, and emotional pieces. So I grew up with all these separate pieces, clues to what my mother did to me.
mhm,
That was the essence of my family. When I was 12 years old, a boy in school pulled my chair out from under me and I landed hard on my tailbone. If you have any children in your life in the audience, please tell them to never pull a chair out from under anyone. I'm
mhm,
lucky I can walk. Some people are
mhm,
instantly paralyzed, but medical professionals misdiagnosed my childhood injury for 33 years,
mhm,
leaving me without a place, pelvis, hips, and vertebra. I
mhm,
finally got the correct diagnosis
mhm,
when I was 45 years old, and I got the correct treatment to fix the what happened to my spine. But now my muscles still hurt because my pelvis, hips, and vertebrae were out of place. That means my muscles were doing all the wrong things for decades. So now my muscles have to get used to normal. And it's not easy and it's painful. So I'm
mhm,
still in pain. I'm 73 years old and I've been in pain from my back since I was 12 years old. So 61 years of pain. Getting better, but still 61 years of pain.
mhm,
When I was 28 years old, my husband died when our daughter was 8 months old. So I had three life altering tragedies to cope with by age 28.
mhm,
And I am doing my best now to ease trauma for other people or to prevent trauma for other people. I
mhm,
write a lot about stereotypes. I didn't go to college until I was 35 because my mother would have
mhm,
controlled where I went and what I took. And I didn't want to do that. So
mhm,
I didn't go to college till I was 35 after my husband died. And when I was Well, in 1988, I started college in 1985. In 1988, I
mhm,
watched a talk show hosted by a woman, and I watched that female host betray a female guest on her show.
mhm,
I couldn't believe how she did it. She, in essence, made that guest responsible for her own rape if she got raped. And I couldn't believe the host would do that. So I
mhm,
went to grad school and I started researching women's talk shows and discovered gossip,
mhm,
good, bad, and ugly gossip, and then got really into researching stereotypes. I now have 5 blog posts listing more than 1,000 stereotypes about people. We all face stereotypes. We people probably think that someone like you, Bernadette, face a lot of stereotypes because of the color of your skin. But I made a list yesterday of most of the stereotypes,
Yeah.
leaving out the political party I vote for because I don't want to
Mhm,
get into politics. I face about 100 stereotypes from other categories.
mhm,
A white woman
mhm,
living in
mhm,
America, and I
yeah.
face more than 100 stereotypes because of the way people stereotype. So now I'm working on getting people to understand that they face
Mhm,
stereotypes every single time they walk out their door. And if they
mhm,
don't know what the stereotypes are, they can't do anything about them. I didn't know that I was a threat to my mother. I didn't know why she tried to kill me until I was 34 years old. And the brother who was born right after me told me. I didn't
mhm,
know. I didn't know what to do about my relationship with my mother until after he told me. It took me another
mhm,
40, another 12, 8 years, I think, to make the decision I needed to make.
mhm,
But I could make it because I now understood the stereotype.
yeah.
And my decision was to walk away from my relationship with my mother because it was never going to improve. It
Yeah.
was never going to change.
Mhm, yeah.
So that's what I'm doing now,
Mhm,
focusing on that and helping people learn soft skill strategies. Because my mother terrified me and my father scared me, I developed soft skill strategies as a child to reach out to people beyond my family.
mhm,
And when I was 7 years old, I finally felt safe with an adult for the first time. My first second grade teacher, it was an all Catholic elementary school. The teacher got married in the middle of the year and moved away. I have no memory of the teacher who came after her,
Mm,
but she made me feel safe. I can't remember exactly what she did,
mm,
but she made me feel safe.
yeah. Yeah.
I felt like I could be myself with her.
Hmm. Yeah.
And then when I was 11 in this elementary school, Sister Vianney came to be the principal.
Mm,
I said something to Sister Vianney that
mhm,
she liked so much that she started inviting me to come to her office for conversations. I have no memory of what I said to her. It was too long ago. And I didn't know I should pay attention to it when I was 11, but she,
Yeah. Yeah.
she had me come to her office and we'd have conversations. I remembered sitting across the desk from her and talking and laughing, and it was wonderful. And at age 11, those conversations made me feel equal to any person in any room. Here I was, a fifth grader, talking to the principal in her office, conversations, and she was treating me as her equal in the conversations. So I have felt equal to any person in any room since 11 years old. When
Mm,
I first heard about the imposter syndrome, I had to look it up because I've never felt like an imposter.
mm,
I've always felt equal.
mhm.
And now lately I've been trying to figure out what to say to everybody who has the imposter syndrome, who does not feel equal, who didn't have the benefit of conversations with an adult who treated them like equal. And this is what I've come up with.
Yeah.
We are all equal in humanity. Every one of us is a human being. We
Mhm,
are all equal to humanity.
mhm,
Anytime you walk into a room, you tell yourself, I am equal to in humanity to every person in this room because you are.
yeah.
And when you can feel equal in one way to other people, then you can start to feel equal in other ways.
Mm,
So begin by reminding yourself everywhere that you are equal to everyone in humanity.
mhm. I love that. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. There's so much we need to unpack, and I'm just excited to dive deeper to get to know more of your story. And let me say this, I'm inspired by your strength, by your story, and by your resilience to honor people's pain and also to help them where they are. Because you're right, all of us face stereotypes, and I love the example you used. And I love that you just dive in. You know, I talked about this on the podcast and other separate episodes, is that sometimes we ignore the actual issue. We go
Mhm.
around it and we pretend it doesn't exist, right? And I love
Right,
you go straight to it. You just talk about it because it's
right.
true. If I go anywhere, the first thing people see is this physical vessel. They can't
Yes,
see my soul. They can't see the love I have to give. That's what
right,
and
right.
it happens to
And
people too, like you, that are we call them white, but I really
right,
don't like the color that
right,
humanity places on souls. And I still struggle with this because I see people for who they are. I see past the vessel. It's just a vessel. We need to use it
right,
and
right,
to exist and to experience life. What are
right.
your thoughts?
And you can never tell just by looking at someone who can do what for your life. You just can't tell.
Yeah.
And I have online soft skill strategy courses. On that website, there are 3 videos from my lessons that are free for anyone to watch. One of the lessons is about the 3 groups of people in our lives. There are people who get what we're doing, there are people who will never get what we're doing, and there are people who could go either way, depending upon what we invite them to do.
Yeah.
And in that video, I say that the 3 people who have opened the widest doors of international influence for me are all Black. Now, if I were prejudiced and I thought, oh, a Black person can't do anything for me,
Mm,
I wouldn't have the international influence I have now because I would have lost out on what they could offer me. So you
mhm,
just never can tell by anyone,
yeah,
by looking at anyone. And
mm.
anyone who feels prejudiced about Blacks should never consider having heart surgery because, yes, heart surgery as we know it
Mm,
started with a 19-year-old Black teenager who applied to a surgical research lab for a job. Vivian Thomas, he was a man, his name was Vivian Thomas, Vivien,
Mhm.
was a carpenter who was saving money to go to medical school
Mm.
in the late 1920s. His only
Mhm.
education was high school. The
Mm.
1929 crash happened and wiped out his savings. In 1930, he went to Dr. Alfred Blaylock's research lab to apply for a job as a research technician.
Mhm.
White Dr. Blaylock looked beyond a teenager who was a teenager, a Black teenager, a Black male teenager, who in this day's society is seen as a threat. Dr. Blaylock saw something inside Vivian and offered him the job.
Mhm.
Within 2 weeks, Vivian was doing experimental surgery on dogs all by himself because
Mm.
Dr. Blaylock trusted him that much.
Yeah, yeah.
And this is a great story of a combination of people who are often seen as not good enough.
Mm.
They were working they started out in Tennessee,
Mhm.
and then Dr. Blaylock wanted to move to a different hospital. A hospital in Detroit said, "Oh no, we can't take your Black assistant." So they went to Johns Hopkins Hospital. At Hopkins, Helen, oh my God. There was a teacher, a doctor, a
Yeah,
pediatric cardiologist. Helen Taussig,
yeah.
Helen Taussig, who was a cardiologist. So, the heartbeat, she was
Mhm.
deaf.
Yeah.
She could feel the heartbeat of babies with her fingertips. This
Wow.
deaf doctor, this deaf cardiologist went to Dr. Blaylock and his Black assistant and said, "Could you come up with a surgery to heal babies' hearts when they have blue heart syndrome, where the arteries
Mm.
to the heart and the lungs are misplaced and the babies turn blue because they can't get enough oxygen?" So
Mm.
this deaf cardiologist went to the white doctor and the Black assistant and said, "Can you do this?" And they
Mhm.
did it. And it was Vivian Thomas who developed the techniques for heart surgery that
Mm.
are mostly used today. He also developed instruments that are still used today.
Mhm.
And he had only a high school education. He
Wow.
still had the desire to be a doctor. So he approached a university
Mhm.
after he had developed heart surgery. He developed a university about attending school there to become a doctor. And
Mhm.
they said, "Oh, you'd have to start out with the very basic classes."
Mm.
So they completely ignored this. Now, Dr. Blaylock and Vivian Thomas are together seen as pioneers in heart surgery. So
Wow.
that university that turned him away
Mhm.
lost the chance to be able to say, this alumna, this
Yeah.
alumni of ours.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so
So
good.
they
That's really
blew
cool.
it.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
you think Blacks are good for nothing, then don't have heart surgery and don't let anybody in your family have heart surgery because it started with a Black teenager
Yeah,
with a high
yeah,
school education.
yeah. I didn't know that. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate
I
it. Yeah,
know. I've
yeah.
I've read that Vivian Thomas is the most unknown hero in Black history. So
Mm.
I talk about him to get people to know. So then now you could talk about him, and
Mhm.
you just look him up. Vivian Thomas,
Mhm.
Johns Hopkins Hospital. They have
Mhm.
portraits of Dr. Blaylock and Vivian Thomas next to each other in the
That's really
appropriate
cool.
building.
Yeah, that's really cool. Thank you for sharing. I definitely agree that we need each other regardless of what we see on the
Right,
outside. It's always
right.
inside that it starts. Yeah. I have a few questions though for you relating to what happened to you when you were young.
Yes.
Did you say that your mother was schizophrenic or she
My grandmother.
your grandmother?
Her
Okay.
mother, my mother was a narcissist because my
Mm.
grandmother was a paranoid schizophrenic who
Oh,
had no
okay.
idea how to nurture. And so my mother became a
Mhm.
narcissist because that's the only way she knew how to take care of herself, apparently. And her
Yeah,
father
yeah.
left when she was a teenager, moved out when she was a teenager.
Mhm.
My grandparents came from Romania. They had been living in Hungary before World War One. That part
Mhm.
of Hungary became part of Romania. They
Mhm.
didn't want to live in Romania, so they came here. First, they went
Mhm.
down to St. Louis, where they did have some relatives. Then for some reason they moved to Chicago. I don't know why, because my mother was secretive and my grandmother was paranoid schizophrenic.
Mhm.
But there was no family support. It was just that small family unit. And so when my grandfather moved out, it was just my mother, her older sister, and my grandmother. And
Mhm.
my grandmother was a terrible mother.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I understand why my mother was as terrible as she was, but it still doesn't make my life any easier. It
Yeah.
just,
Yeah. Yeah. How did you ended up forgiving your mother for everything she did? Is she still alive? Did she pass?
well,
And
she's been dead for 6 years.
okay.
I
Okay.
did forgive her in a way because I understand that she had no idea how to nurture.
Mm,
But I walked away from a relationship 23 years before she died. I realized that I understood the stereotype
mm,
finally, and I knew that there was no way I could become a boy.
mm,
I could become her first son. So there was no way our relationship was ever going to be good. So I
mm,
walked away
mhm.
23 years before she died.
Yeah.
And the goal of my life until she died was that I would never hear her voice again. And I never
Mm,
did. I succeeded at that.
yeah. What was your healing process through all the trauma that you went through as a child?
As a child,
Hmm.
well, I listened to positive words I could trust. My
Mm,
father said positive things to me. The second grade teacher said positive things to me. Sister Vianney said positive things to me. I listened to positive words I could trust, and I spoke positive words others could trust.
yeah.
But possibly most importantly, I said positive words to myself. I didn't say negative things to myself. I
Mhm,
became a compulsive overeater for 25 years to
mhm,
bury my memories of being murdered and my feelings, my terror, but I didn't tell myself I was a horrible person because I was a binge eater. I knew it was a response to a situation. I didn't understand the situation for all of those 25 years, but I knew it was a situation. I knew I wasn't a terrible person. I knew it was a coping method. So I didn't say negative words to myself, and I still don't. When I do something stupid, I don't say you're stupid. I say that was stupid to do. I don't call myself anything
yeah.
negative.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then I talk about taking positive control in small spaces of situations and relationships. And the
Mhm,
first places I took positive control were my ears and my mouth.
mhm,
And if you start there and you just start focusing on listening to words you can trust, if someone says positive words from you to you and then wants you to do something from that for them,
mhm.
you can't trust them. But if
Yeah.
someone says positive words to you and that's it, they don't ask you for anything, you know you can trust them.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Yeah, I do. Can you talk more about your spine injury?
Yes.
Mhm.
And I got the correct diagnosis by trying to take positive control in small spaces. I got 33 years of all kinds of misdiagnoses. The last diagnosis was that I was emotional. And if I just kept
Mm,
doing what hurt, the pain would go away. Well, the
mm,
pain wasn't bad in the beginning. And the pain up until about 1988, the pain was not constant. Well, the pain was never constant in my spine. I did
mm,
develop muscle pain that was constant, but the pain in my spine was never constant.
mhm,
So in the beginning, and it wasn't really bad in the beginning. So I just kept
mhm.
doing what hurt because
Yeah.
I would have had to stop doing all kinds of things. But
Mhm,
every time I did something that hurt, the pain increased. And over time, the injury happened when I was 12. By
mhm,
28, I was having difficulty sitting and standing normally.
mhm,
And I went to college and did not sit in a seat in a desk with my feet flat in the floor for any class in college, not even a single time. I
mhm,
sat with my feet on another chair. I
mhm,
had the school allowed me to paid to have a rocking chair adapted into a chair I could push to my classes. Took the rockers off, put wheels on it so it was lower to the floor, which is better for my back.
mhm,
Stored it for me in a room in a building for 4 years.
mhm,
And then one class, I lay on the floor for the entire class. I lay on the floor.
Mm.
Or I sat on the floor with my back against the wall. That's how I got through college.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
then, yeah, that's how I got through college.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
then I discovered that I was good at speaking from another student in the Com 101 and decided to go into professional speaking. I would ask the groups that I spoke to for a tall stool for me to use, and I would bring my lumbar pillow with. In 1996, I went to a city 2.5 miles from where I live to do a talk to a businesswomen's group. And I explained the stool and the lumbar pillow. And I said, explained the accident and said, if you have any children in your life, please never pull a chair out from under anyone. The
Yeah.
interesting thing is that I had done a talk for another businesswomen's group and said that
Mm-hmm.
somebody at the group taped that speech. And I showed it to a very successful professional speaker I knew for her and asking for her opinion. She
Mm-hmm.
told me, you're a natural speaker, but she said, don't talk about your back. But I felt I should continue talking about my back because I wanted to prevent other people from going through the pain I went through. So I said this at the businesswomen's group, 2.5 hours from my house. After my speech, a nurse who had been in the audience, this can still make me cry. She came up to me afterwards and gave me the correct diagnosis for my spinal injury and
Wow.
told me the treatment that would end the pain in my spine
Mm.
because I tried to help other people. I
Yeah.
took positive control in that situation by doing what I felt I needed to do to help other people, and I got the correct diagnosis for my spinal injury.
Mm.
Her husband was a chiropractor who used an unusual technique called neural organizational technique.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
I know
I've
it's
never
not well
heard of that.
known. I know it's not well known, and people promoted it for the wrong reasons. So it has a bad reputation in some ways. But I still talk about it because it fixed my spine.
Yeah.
On the 2.5 hour drive home, I thought about what the nurse had said and decided that of everything anybody had ever said to me about my back, I thought this would work. So I made an appointment, went to see the chiropractor. The
Mhm.
nurse had told me that when I hit the floor, my spinal cord had tensed up.
Ooh.
No medical professional paid to see me ever mentioned my spinal cord. And I
Mm.
didn't know enough about the spine to ask.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So she told me that my spinal cord had tensed up and that every time I did something that hurt, the tension in my spinal cord increased, which
Mm.
meant that the pain increased.
Yeah.
One chiropractor I had been to had sent me for x rays. The x rays showed that I had no S curve in my spine, which means my pelvis was completely back, far back as it could go. I
Yeah.
don't know why that chiropractor didn't go beyond that to say, oh, your spinal cord is tensed up, but he didn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I
Right.
didn't know enough to ask. And this was in the early 90s, was there wasn't as much information. What could I look up on the internet in the early
Yeah.
90s? And no, this is 1985, I
Yeah.
think. So there was nothing. There's no way for me to research this.
Mm-hmm.
So the chiropractor, who was the husband of the nurse,
Yeah.
told me that the spinal cord is attached to the spine by a muscle in the lower neck and at the base of the spine.
Mm.
Those two muscles were also tensed up because its spinal cord was tensed up. He took
Mm.
a laser pen, shined it on the muscle at the top of my spinal cord, released the tension in this muscle, and
Yeah.
the tension in my spinal cord released, and my pelvis just moved right back into place.
Mm.
I have not had any pain in my spine since that day. In 1 hour, he
Yeah.
ended 3 years of pain in my spine.
Mm. Yeah. I feel your pain. I actually am I've been struggling with spine issues and pain for the past almost 4 years. And as I sit here, yes, I look great, but the pain, I feel it at the back of my neck, my shoulders, and it's my skeletal system. I actually did a Facebook Live on that yesterday, just sharing my journey of chronic pain. And that goes to show that pain does not discriminate. It can happen to the young, to the old, to anyone, right? And
Right.
I feel your pain because I can resonate so much with it because I've done spine injections, x-rays, physio, chiro, and cream and pills. Still no result. Not
Oh,
much is helping. So I'm still in pain. I don't know how long I'll be in pain for, but doctors are not able to help or find anything that's wrong. I'm just existing.
are your bones in place? Let's start there. Are your bones in place? Do you know?
Well, they told me that I have a bit of sclerosis in my lower spine. There's arthritis,
Uh-huh.
and somehow my nerves get pinched. That's
Oh,
all I know. Yeah,
yeah, different issues. Well,
but yeah,
sorry to
it's
hear it,
crippling.
Bernadette. I'm
It's
sorry.
crippling. Yeah,
Yes, yes,
yeah,
and it's invisible. And I've faced a lot of stereotypes because it's invisible, and I bet you have too,
yes,
because
I
it's
have.
invisible.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I'm diagnosed with mental health issues. You just tossing that on the top of it. It's a lot. Yeah.
It's a,
What would you say to people who are struggling with chronic pain?
well, you have to keep believing yourself,
Mm,
believing that you are in the pain you're in. You can't let
mhm.
people tell you you're not in pain, or it can't be pain, or it can't be anything but that's your emotion.
Yeah, 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 I agree. Yeah.
The last diagnosis I got was from a physical therapist who was doing a functional test for Social Security disability, and she told me that I had to carry increasing weights up and down a hallway. And I started crying because I knew it would be torture. And because I cried, she decided I was being emotional and that I was hostile to her. So you just have to
Wow.
ignore everything like that and just keep trying and
Yeah.
do whatever you can. I tried to stop other people from being in pain, and I got the correct diagnosis for my spinal injury. I'm
Hmm.
still in pain because my muscles were doing the wrong things for
Yeah.
decades with the
Yeah.
bones out of place.
Hmm.
I'm slowly easing the pain.
Hmm.
Maybe you should consider what kind of car you drive. In 1991, I had a
Hmm.
boyfriend who bought a 1983 Honda Civic.
Hmm.
I sat in the passenger seat of that car, and the pain in my hips just stopped. And
Hmm.
then whenever I was in this car, I had no pain in my
Hmm.
hips.
Yeah.
I later found out that foreign cars have a better vibration rate for lower back problems than American cars.
Hmm.
And when I ended my relationship with my mother, I told her to take me out of her will because she made
Hmm.
everything about money. When my husband died, I was living up in Wisconsin. I had grown up in Illinois.
Hmm.
After my husband died, I went back to my parents' house for a year and a half
Yeah.
because his death was sudden and traumatic, and I had to recuperate from that.
Hmm.
And while we were living there, my mother took 3/4 of my Social Security payments
Oh, wow.
to put in a bank account for European trips. And I was in
Mhm.
shock. There was part of me that was still terrified of her. I was in shock from my husband's death, and she just took my money. So when my daughter and I moved out, we had no savings for our new life on our own because my mother had taken most of it.
Mhm.
So when I ended my relationship with her, I told her to take me out of her will because I didn't want any part of her money.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, she kept me in her will to prove to herself that she was a good mother. I am certain that she very quickly buried her
Mhm.
memories of murdering me and would tell people that she was a good mother. Have you ever heard a mother tell other people that they're a good mother?
Yeah. Yeah. We only can see what we're shown. Not all of
Right,
us have the ability to
right,
see past
right.
that.
So she convinced herself she was a good mother, and she did it by keeping me in her will. So when she died, I got trust fund money, and I test drove some cars and bought a car that holds my hips in place.
Mm.
In 2014, I started writing in my journal. I keep a journal of my daily activities.
Mhm.
In 2014, I started writing about 2 to 3 lower back vertebrae shifting out of place when
Mm.
I did the cobra
Mhm.
stretch. And
Mhm.
I would write the vertebra thunked. Well, I never feel my vertebra shifting out of place. I feel them moving back into place, and there
Mm.
is a thunk. I actually could hear my vertebra moving back into place. It was a thunking sound,
Oh,
and I would
wow.
hear it.
Was
Felt
it
it.
painful?
Yes, it was painful. Pain could last for an hour.
Oh,
So in
wow.
2014, I started running about 2 to 3 vertebra
Mhm.
funking back into place every day. And it was every day until a couple of months after I got my car. And then it would go down to one thunk a day. And then there would be days when there was no thunk and
Yeah.
would go back and forth for a while. Well, I've had my car for 3.5 years now,
Mhm.
and I hardly ever have a lower back thunk anymore because those seats are getting my skeleton to stay in place, all my bones to stay in place, and
Yeah.
my muscles are learning how to hold my bones in place.
Mhm.
So, my advice to anyone with back problems is to look into any seating they have. I have a particular kind of desk chair that's good for
Yeah.
my spine. I recommend try driving a foreign car or different foreign cars. Hondas don't work for me. I drive a Hyundai Kona SEL SUV.
Mhm.
That's what's good for my spine.
Mhm.
Kona Hyundais, an early Hyundai was a little bit easier on my spine,
Mhm.
but later Hondas are not. So Hondas are not good for my back, but Hyundai SEL SUVs are.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
I had to I had to take loaner cars from the dealership for a while
Mhm.
because my car had to be in for a while, and I drove an Ionic 5, an electric car. It
Mhm.
was horrible. Those seats were horrible for my back. So if you're going to try the car method, you have to drive more than one model for a particular dealer. So a Honda has been good at times. A Toyota has been not as good as a Honda, but it's better than an American car. And Hyundai is better for me as long as it's a Kona. So just
Yeah.
test drive cars and see if you could find a car, because my Kona has made a huge difference in my life.
Mhm.
So depending upon your back injury or back issue, you might be able to get some relief from the kind of car you drive or the kind of seats you sit in. I also have a zero gravity chair. Do you know what those are?
No, no
Zero
gravity.
gravity
Do you
chair.
fall?
Look them up online. They
Okay.
are like a recliner, but they're structured in a way to do good things for the back. And
Mhm.
so I have that, which I sit in every day too. It doesn't hold my hips in place the way the Coda seats do, but I do always feel better. The muscles of my back feel better
Mhm.
after sitting in my
Yeah.
chair, my zero gravity chair. So those are two things you could try.
Mhm.
Start with those. Those
Yeah.
are basic functional things.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for sharing. Can you walk me through how your courses go and what people get out of them, what you hope for them to continue to learn?
The first course is career advancement up, going in alphabetical order, career advancement up, career backlash down, subtitled loyalty up, stereotypes down.
Mhm.
It's based on disc behavior styles. Have you heard of disc behavior styles?
No.
No, okay. The man who created Wonder Woman, William Moulton Marston, also created the disc behavior style theory. He created the disc theory in 1928, Wonder Woman in 1941, but he created Wonder Woman under the name Charles Moulton.
Mhm.
Disc theory is based on observable behavior.
Mhm. Sorry,
And
my cat. They go
that's
crazy when
okay.
I'm recording, so
The disc theory identifies 4 behavior styles: dominance, influence, steadiness, and conscientiousness.
Mhm.
Those are 4 behavior styles. And when you understand how to recognize them, then you know how to talk to them. And when you know your own behavior style, you know what to say to people about what you need, because this is my
Mhm.
behavior style.
Yeah.
And then, so William Moulton Marston started that in 1928. In 1928 as well, a man named Edward R. Springer identified 6 attitudes he called, but a lot of modern researchers use the word values, as do I. His original 6 were theoretical. Oh, gracious, I'm going to forget. Anyway,
It's okay. It's all good.
because I renamed them. A lot of people rename them. They are the ones I use are knowledge,
Mhm,
usefulness, harmony, belief, helping, and position.
mhm,
Those are the guiding, well, they can be the guiding values. We make decisions based on
mhm.
what those values mean in our lives.
Yeah.
Springer wrote about complicated sets. He wrote about 2 values combining together to influence our decision making.
Mhm,
If you know someone's guiding values, I call them guiding values. The complicated set, I call it guiding values. If
mhm,
you know someone's guiding values, you know how they make decisions. And when you know how someone makes decisions, you know if you should enter any kind of relationship with them. If you can't live with their decisions, you shouldn't be a friend or a business partner or a spouse because those decisions will damage the relationship or make the relationship unworkable. So
yeah.
when you know guiding values, my guiding values are helping and knowledge. So I want to help people with information, just like all the information I just gave about the cars and the
Yeah,
zero
I'm
there.
sure it will be useful, for people who do drive. Yeah, yeah.
Yes, zero
Yeah.
gravity chair. Yes, try those. So
Mhm.
that's my. So if someone who has my mother's values were position and usefulness.
Mm,
I'm not sure which order, but I wasn't useful to her
mm,
because I was a daughter, her second daughter instead of her first son. So that I had no use at all in her life at
mhm,
all. And her position got, and people with position value are concerned about where they are in the hierarchy.
mhm.
And so
Yeah.
not being a boy
Mm,
meant she was not at the top of the hierarchy as a worthy woman the way she wanted to be. So those guiding values meant I was never going to have any value in her life. So there's no reason in my continuing a relationship with her.
yeah.
That's how you know how to make decisions about relationships.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. I have 3 questions. The first one is, do you have anything else you'd like to add for my listeners or for me to get out of this episode?
I try to start conversations everywhere I go because you just never know who you're going to be talking to. And I've heard people discount small talk or chit chat, but when you start conversations everywhere you go with
Mhm.
people who are willing, you don't, some people aren't willing, so then you just stop, you don't continue. But I've had wonderful conversations. And when you participate in chit
Mhm.
chat is practice in a wide variety of situations with a wide variety of people for that develops confidence. They will cultivate confidence for you to
Mhm.
approach a particular individual in a particular situation for a career conversation. You
Mhm.
practice all this chit chat is practice for those all important career conversations.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, yeah, definitely. My second question for you is, what is the meaning of life for you?
The meaning of life is to make make my horrific life worth it by making life better for other people.
Mm,
Now, every single time I make someone else's life better, the horror of my own life, particularly my childhood, diminishes a little bit.
mm,
And I really like getting older because it takes me farther away from my childhood.
mm,
And the older I get, the more influence I have in helping other people
mhm, mhm.
have better lives.
Yeah, 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 I love that. And my last question for you is, where can my listeners find you, support the work that you're doing?
My soft skills study courses are at softskillsstrategycourses.com.
Mm,
If you are interested in the idea of parents killing children, children die at the hands of their parents every single day. More children than most people realize. 4 to 5 children die every day through neglect or abuse. About one child dies every day through the intentional actions of their parents. I survived twice. I survived my mother's murder attempts twice. I have talked to about a dozen other adults who remember one or both of their parents trying to kill them.
Mm,
I have a page on another website. I have a speakingfromtriumph.com, which is my main website. On that website is a page called Murder Secret Families. For anyone who wants to understand better
mhm,
why parents try to kill their children, who tries to kill their children, it's not the poor single teenagers all the time that a lot of people would stereotype it as. My mother was a married middle class Catholic woman, and she tried to kill me twice. And I put a lot of research there. I have
mhm,
sections of my journal there where I came to understand the clues of my life and came to the point where I could wake up from a dream and say, Mom did try to kill me. And
mm,
the aftermath of it, I went through. I had to go through a really horrific period. I went to the edge of insanity for 8 hours one day.
mhm,
And I
mhm,
had to get there so that I could admit to myself that my mother had never loved me. The central myth of my life, particularly my childhood, was that my mother could be mean to me, but that she did love me. She never loved me. I
mm,
had to get past the idea that she did love me to be able to admit to myself that she had tried to kill me. So if anyone's interested in any way as a therapist, one of my therapists was horrible. She had good intentions, but she was horrible. Or as a survivor, or anyone, any interest, there's a lot of information on that webpage. And there's a Facebook page
mhm,
that you can join if you have those memories. So far, I've only one other member on that page, but you can join and it would be someplace to say whatever you need to say because I've encountered a lot of disbelief.
mm.
Oh, your mother really loved you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Wow. Well, Paula M. Kramer, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Thank you for opening up your hearts and for helping other people heal through your story. And thank you for what you continue to do.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Bernadette.
You're welcome.